Our guests in this segment via telephone, the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Ryan Saxe. Dr. Saxe, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate your flexibility where I can call in this morning. But I know that you have one of our dedicated folks with you as well.
Dean Olack, he is the lead safety officer in Berkeley County Schools. Dean, good morning. Thank you for being here as well.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for having me.
Bill brought up a question. We had Jackie Long and Melissa Power from the Board of Education with us in the last segment about security in schools, the hardening of schools, and how that process was continuing along. Dean, Dr. Saxe, which one of you would like to tackle that one and let us know how safe our children are in the schools?
I'll be happy.
Well, if I'll say, well, actually, if you don't mind, let me just say that, first and foremost, our priority in Berkeley County Schools is to make sure that our students and our staff are safe every single day. That's immediately followed by making sure that we have high-quality instruction taking place. So the lens that we look at from the boardroom to the classroom is making sure that what we're doing and what we are prioritizing is best for our students and keeps students and staff safe. And so I think that there's a very focused effort among the board and our administration for Berkeley County Schools to make sure that we are continually evaluating our safety protocols, our safety measures, and what additional resources we may need to implement in order to make sure students are safe. And, part of that effort is the people that are working every single day, like Dean Olack, who is in our schools, who is helping set the vision for what it is that we need to be able to accomplish. Working with our first responders, the Berkeley County Emergency Management team, all of those entities to make sure that we have input into makes our schools safe. So I just wanted to provide that first lens, and then Dean, is there anything you'd like to expand upon? High level.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thank you for that segue, Dr. Saxe. Obviously safety is our number one concern in the school district. Education can't succeed without the safety of our kids and our faculty. So we're continuously reevaluating our protocol, reevaluating our system to make it better. We've created this, and I'll get into it here in a little bit, but a middle school program that Mike said his kids go to South Middle School and Martinsburg High School, and South is where I'm stationed at. So what we've done is we've created a hardening of our schools, not only doors and locks and badges, windows, stuff like that, but we've also created a position where we can place school resource officers inside our schools to make our kids, make our students, our faculty, and make our parents feel safer.
I want to continue on that safety discussion, but from a different angle, because of the number of teachers that I know related to and emails that I get, and we can start in the special needs section of the school system. And we all agree we want to keep our students safe, but we also want to keep our teachers safe too. How are we keeping our teachers safe from violent children? Dr. Saxe, Dean Olack, what procedures are in place in Berkeley County Schools for that?
Well, the first thing is that, when we have a child that has a disruptive behavior or identified behavior disorder, the first thing that we do is we make sure that we have staff that are appropriately trained in how to de-escalate behaviors. Our goal is that when we are in the classroom, in our schools, providing instruction, that as the environment, the environment can have triggers that cause a student with disruptive behaviors to escalate. So the first thing we want to be able to do is we want to be able to give our teachers and our staff the resources to know how to de-escalate certain behaviors. And a lot of times the technique in which we use to de-escalate, as well as identifying for individual students what those triggers are, comes from a multidisciplinary team. So that is it could be the regular ed teacher, it could be the special education teacher, it could be the ECAT in the classroom, it could be the aide, the administrator. There's usually a special ed coordinator of some sort that is there that can also identify other resources like a behavior technician that can help identify and give strategies to de-escalate those behaviors. But, if a behavior is to escalate to where, they're, it's much more of a problem or a safety concern, then we also give our teachers and our staff training on how to, not necessarily restrain, but to block or to restrain a student from harming themselves or others. And so, I think that's the big thing is that we want to make sure we give our teachers and our staff the resources to address these situations when they occur so that they can continue to be safe.
Dean, is that your department at all, or are you strictly about the building?
My department deals with the safety of the building, the safety of the teachers as well. One side note for Dr. Saxe, he made it evident that we want to give our teachers and empower our teachers to be able to defend themselves in cases that they need. And that is true, in situations where they face physical aggression from threats and it doesn't have to be just students, but it could be parents that come in or anybody. They have the right to defend themselves against physical aggression. And, there's a way, an appropriateness and a proportional relationship to the way that they respond to the action that is posed against them as well.
You want to elaborate on that a little bit, Dean?
Yeah, I mean, we have a strict policy. It's 4373, and it basically allows a teacher to respond to the environment that's presented to itself. We can't come up with every possible situation. That's why we're placed in the buildings. Our vision in the buildings, our just stature of being in the buildings and being able to be seen from our perspective helps most times de-escalate situations where we are seen in buildings as some bit of authoritative figure. Although we're not law enforcement, we're safety officers for the schools. Our job is to mitigate any type of threat, whether it's exterior threat or interior threat inside the building. That's what our job is.
Do the teachers have an emergency call button that they have access to?
Teachers have different resources that they have. They have radios, they have cell phones. Sometimes rooms have phones in them that contact administration, and which is constantly monitored by us as well inside the buildings.
Yeah, there's some talk a couple of years ago about arming the teachers. Is that part of the protocol that you're discussing?
Well, me personally and professionally, from my years of law enforcement experience, I disagree with that. Mm-hmm. I truly believe our teachers are hired to teach. If we want to arm people, let's arm people that are trained and qualified like ourselves.
Sure. The SROs, are they a product of the school system or from the sheriff's department or a combination thereof?
Right. So right now we have 4 high schools, and in each of our high school we have an SRO that is a certified law enforcement officer. Currently we have 3
from the Berkeley County Sheriff's Department or the Martinsburg.
Correct. Currently, we have 3 deputies from the Berkeley County Sheriff's Department, and they serve Musselman High School, Hedgesville High School, and Spring Mills. Mm-hmm. And from the Martinsburg City Police Department, we have 1 SRO that serves Martinsburg High School.
Sure. Okay. And then for the middle schools, elementary schools, are they from the Sheriff's Department or something that you're growing your own?
That's a program that we're growing right now. With the last administration and continue with Dr. Saxe's views, safety is paramount right now. So what we've done is we were able to hire, currently we have 6 middle schools in Berkeley County, and we were able to hire 6 school safety officers, 1 for each middle school. Now their responsibility is to cover that home school, their middle school. That's where we're seeing a lot of our start of our problems before they get to adulthood, and if we could nip them at that age, I think we're much better off. But we also filter down to our feeder schools. So if we have, like say, for example, South, Mike, your kids go to South, that's my home school, but I also cover the feeder schools such as Rosemont and OVI that feed up there. So if we have a need or a concern at one of those schools, those are my schools as well.
Dean, do you think there should be a safety officer in every school?
I would love to see that. And my vision would be at some time. I know that we get into finances and budgetary stuff, but there's no more importance to have safety in every single school in my mind, because no one school is better than another. We started with the high schools and we worked down to the middle schools with this program, and I would love to see it continue its way down.
And even if we did have a safety officer in any school, a nefarious character, if you look at, let's say, South and Martinsburg High, any afternoon, there's kids running around playgrounds, sports fields. It's I know a lot of people talk about the trailers and trying to harden those, but the complex itself is very wide open, and there's streets nearby. So if somebody has ill intentions, there's always going to be that opportunity. How do you deal with that as a safety officer when you look at that complex?
Yeah, there's always in our minds potential risks, and different type of threats, and that's why Dr. Saxe mentioned that we continually to evaluate our system, and this even goes back to more of an understanding is we've had this summit here last month in December where we had some great speakers and great guests.
The safety summit?
Yes, the safety summit, and from that summit, we've learned a lot of things, that this is not necessarily a school problem, but it's a community problem. Mm-hmm. So we have to be engaged with our community to let our community understand, our position, and to ask for the help from the community as well. Because, yes, we live in somewhat of a rural area where some of these schools are out in the middle of nowhere, and some of these schools are in congested areas where, you're right, after school, there's a lot of traffic and a lot of things going on. Can we 100% put a bubble over it? No, we can't do that. Right. But we have to be cautious, and we have to rely on the community. So if there is a nefarious actor out there, we need to let our community engage us, and we need to collaborate with them to be open and allow them to make the calls. If they see something, they need to report that to us. We need to be aware of it, because it's not just a simple my problem or your problem. It's our community problem. This is the community that we live in.
Yeah, the summit you referred to, Dean, that's something a lot of us was not aware of until just before it happened. And then once it happened, then we have not heard very much about it after the fact. Two questions. One, I think it was a phenomenal thing to do. Who's responsible for getting it in Martinsburg? And second, what results, positive results, did you see coming from the summit?
Yeah, so I think it was the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security that was able to secure a grant that allowed that first of its kind to come here.
The local EMS?
Yes, sir. And honestly, the organization is the Safe and Sound Schools with Michelle Gay. Everybody's familiar probably with Michelle Gay from the Connecticut incident, unfortunately. However, it brought us a lot of knowledge from historical events where we could relate to how they acted. And typically that's what we typically do. We evaluate ourselves based on historical events in time, and that's how we either adjust our policy, change our policy, harden our schools based on something that we see. And that's what we've done.
Dean, you said there... Go ahead, Dr. Saxe.
Well, the other thing I wanted to also add is that, we do annual training with all of our staff on school safety and active shooter type situations. But one of the things that we also really try to focus on is making sure that our staff, has situational awareness. When you talk about our campuses and things like that, it's not just the responsibility of a school safety officer to identify threats that could be a problem. And Dean said it perfectly well. It takes everybody, but making sure that the people that are on our campuses have an eye and a lens to look for nefarious type situations, people that are in places they shouldn't be, so that they can report it. Through a radio, through contacting an officer or emergency, our own district response team is extremely important. And so I just wanted to say that that's part of our annual training that we do with our staff. And I think when you look at the trends of these types of situations that have occurred across the country where people have caused harm, 9 times out of 10, there could have been a situation that could have been avoided, but a lot of times it's a human error. It's someone, the flags were there, and they just didn't have the situational awareness to report it in a timely manner so that it could be addressed. And so I think that that's really, really important as we think about how do we get sharper and continue to be prepared, is that we make sure that everybody has that situational awareness of identifying someone who should not be where they're supposed to be, reporting it so that it can be addressed in a safe, controlled manner as much as possible.
Dr. Ryan Saxe, Superintendent of Schools, is with us via telephone. Lead Safety Officer in Berkeley County Schools, Dean Olack, in studio. Did you have a question, Mark?
I do. I have a question for Dean. Are these safety officers that you're installing or putting into the middle schools and hopefully elementary schools, are they going to be armed and trained?
Yes, sir. They're armed, and they qualify under LEOSA.
And they qualify. So really you're using the laws that are currently on the books, and you don't need a new law for West Virginia to enable you to do this easier? Or
a new law may help a little bit
Okay.
to expand our reach, expand the people that we can have. Currently, right now, you have to have at least 10 years of law enforcement, continuous years of experience in law enforcement, have either separated under good standing or has retired. And underneath the federal code, underneath the Chapter 18 in USC, you have to be considered a qualified retired law enforcement officer to be able to carry a gun on educational facilities.
have you had any issues in the hiring of such people, or have you identified a need? Like, would you get applicants if this job was open right now?
Well, I could tell you this. The reason that we created this is because of the low manpower on law enforcement in general. It would be ideal if we could put a certified law enforcement officer at every single school. That's just not realistic in the times that we have now, because we have to cover so much ground. So what we've done is we've created this hybrid program to be able to put a safety officer in the school that comes with experience. I have 6 safety officers right now we have a diverse group of men and women that serve Berkeley County, that work for EPIC, that serve Berkeley County schools. They come with probably an average of 21 to 22 years experience.
And what's
or more.
the pay range for these officers, if you don't mind me asking?
I think under EPIC right now it is a $60,000 salary.
And Dr. Saxe, do you get that funding? Is that just coming from your local funding, or obviously there isn't any money coming from the state, correct?
Yeah. There's no state aid that provides for officers. So in Berkeley County, that comes from our general fund, and so and I want to say we talked about how we're prioritizing these staff members. I'm tremendously proud of the fact that the board and previous administration had the vision to make sure that they were expanding these resource officers into the middle schools, and so that every middle school had an officer. But that's we need to continue. And under our administration and the current board, one of the things that we're going to try to prioritize is again expanding that down into the intermediate schools over the coming years, because we need to make sure that presence exists. And to say that, I think Dean, said it, that if there was a little more flexibility, I think we would be able to have a wider pool of applicants. And I know that there was some bills that have been
Introduced,
explored in the past. Introduced, explored. And I think those were some really, really good bills. When I worked in Florida, right when the Guardian bill passed, and I was part of a school district where we were hiring retired law enforcement, retired military, and they were going through a very rigorous safety or certification course and program, much like what they do at the state police training facility, to be safety officers in schools. Because the dynamic of being a safety officer in a school and being a police officer out on the streets, there's some different dynamics that need to be explored there. So making sure that it's, I think, having flexibility, having it expanded, so that we're not necessarily always competing with perhaps law enforcement and municipalities, that we can get people that are appropriately trained and certified to be able to keep our schools safe as well, I think is important flexibility to consider in the future. And of course, it would be wonderful if there would be some additional funding sources to be able to help us expand in areas as well.
But Dean, the salary range that you quoted, that's very, very competitive with what we have with the sheriff's office in the city of Martinsburg. So I would think that you would have the recruitment advantage.
We've had some applicants, but because of the strict standards of the 10-year mark and it has to be law enforcement, they just don't qualify. We've had officers from the Eastern Regional Jail. We've had military police officers. We had court bailiffs inquire and apply. But unfortunately, as the way that the code is written right now, that doesn't qualify.
Is that a West Virginia code or federal code, or?
It's both. It's actually a West Virginia code that allows us to carry firearms on educational facilities, but it references 18 USC in the federal code.
So the federal code is the one that's restricting the gene pool that you can draw from.
No, it's the state codes.
Yes.
So that could be modified with
Yes.
some help.
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Saxe, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say that that obviously there is federal and state code that we have to consider, but other states have been able to do this very successfully and modify their own state laws in order to afford retired folks that have experience in safety and policing, whether it be retired military or retired police officers, to be able to go through these certification programs. So I definitely think it's doable.
Dr. Saxe,
We only have a minute left, so
are we copying any other county, or are there any other counties in the state that are doing what you're doing?
Well, what I would say is other people are copying us.
Okay, all right. So there are other counties doing this too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
But it's a handful. I mean, you look at Kanawha County, you look at Mon County. I came from Cabell. Cabell, we were only contracting with the police departments, and that was our limiting factor. But I really do think that Berkeley County is ahead of the curve when it comes to this initiative.
Dr. Saxe, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining us by phone today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a great day.